Hello, my name is Anne Wang. I'm a teaching artist with the Houston Center for Photography. Welcome to our Levy Park Photography workshop. Today's topic is about understanding and controlling light. I hope you will also join me for our live Q&A Saturday morning on Zoom. All the information is available on the Houston Center for Photography website under Education, Levy Park Workshops. Thank you. So the topic for today's presentation is understanding and controlling light. Light is complex to understand. It bounces off some objects while passing through others, creates large or small shadows, and influences the colors and mood of the image. The way light is captured inside a photograph has a dramatic effect on the final image. And understanding light starts with understanding the quality of light, its strength and color, and the direction of light. Let's start with the quality of light. Light is a key factor in creating a successful image. Light determines the brightness and darkness, which create contrast. It also determines the mood and the atmosphere or the image. Why? Because it differs in color, the color temperature of the illuminating light, and tone, the variation of light in a scene from shadows to midtones to highlight. The size, intensity, and direction of the light source relative to the subject is also important. It is also important to achieve a correct exposure in order to get the best texture, vibrancy of color, and luminosity on your subject, and that was covered in our previous workshop. So, as the day goes by and seasons change, natural light tone and brightness will change. The tone of white light is called color temperature and is expressed in degree Kelvin, K. The color temperature of daylight changes during the day from warm light of about 2000 degree Kelvin at sunrise and sunset to a daylight of 5500 to 6500 at noon. When it is cloudy or in the shade, we get a cooler light of 7000 to 10,000 Kelvin, or right before sunrise also. On the image showing the scale of color temperature, notice that candlelight or incandescent light used in homes provide a similar warmth as sunrise and sunset. And it's also interesting to note that the new LED lights can be produced with all color temperatures from 2000 to 10,000 Kelvin and help create the atmosphere desired when you decide to use artificial light. So here we have an example of cold light. These two photographs have a similar mood, blue tint. The one on the left was achieved with artificial light. The one on the right is natural light. This type of blue light occurs before and after sunset. However, during sunset and sunrise, it is a warm light. It is what we call the golden hour, and it's often referred as the best light. It is a warm light, and it is a light that is diffused, gentle, but yet vivid. It starts about 1 hour after sunrise. It can be several hours before sunset and last about 20 minutes after sunset, depending on your location in the world. It is a soft light. The middle of the day or afternoon light, in comparison, is harsh and often leaves subject looking flat. It's called a hard light. So you can tell your camera what kind of light you are shooting, whether it's warm or cold, natural or artificial, by changing the white balance in your camera. Adjusting the white balance on the Kelvin scale in custom mode is the equivalent of manual mode for exposure. It gives the photographer complete control over the white balance. So an accurate white balance means that objects that are white in real life are also white in the image. But accurate is not always what's right for the photograph. You might want to have a warmer or a colder photograph because you are trying to achieve a certain mood or atmosphere. Using the Kelvin scale to skew the white balance to the more orange, create a warm feeling in an image, creating a look similar to shooting near sunset. On the other side, adjusting the white balance towards the blue creates a cooler look, often used to create a somber mood in a photograph. But you do not have to use the Kelvin scale in custom mode. You can also use the settings, the presets for white balance in your camera. And for example, the cloudy or the shade preset is going to give you a warm feeling. The tungsten or the fluorescent preset is going to give you a cooler feeling. So white balance is also one of the reasons many photographers shoot RAW files instead of JPEG. Because with a RAW file, adjusting the white balance can be done in Lightroom using a simpler slider. And for me, it's my preference. I'd rather, I find using the custom setting very cumbersome, and so I prefer to edit the white balance in Lightroom. So what is hard light? Well, hard light produces shadows with minimal transition between the light and dark areas of the image. There is too much dynamic range on bright days. Like shown on the upper right image, the shadows end up too black and the highlights too bright. It's very hard to get the right exposure. Your images will lack detail in the shadows and have completely burnt out hotspots where they ought to be beautiful highlights. Hard light has a bad reputation. Used incorrectly, hard light will create dark shadows under the eyes in a portrait, for example. But I think that hard light can also be used successfully when paying attention to the position of the light to avoid shadowy eyes and create drama inside the portrait, as shown in this one. Also, hard light tends to create more contrast in an image and can be successfully used in street photography, as shown in the image on the bottom right. So hard light can be the right choice depending on the message you want to send and the country you are in. These are examples of images that I took when I lived in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. Over there, I had only hard light and the golden hour was extremely short. So when it's like this, you have to make the best of the light you have. Soft light, on the other hand, has a much more subtle transition between the light and dark areas of the image. Shooting with soft light has less drama, but the smoother shadows prevent details from being lost in the dark areas of the image. Soft light is the kind of light found on an overcast day or a foggy day, in the shade or at twilight. It can also be window light or when a large reflector is used to bounce the light. When shooting a portrait, hard light tends to emphasize imperfections in the skin, while soft light tends to de-squeeze blemishes a bit better. Soft light is like the front lighting of light direction. It's a great starting point for beginners because it's easier to work with. Soft light works best for colorful subjects. While direct sunlight emphasizes the contrast between light and dark, soft light heightens color contrast and can emphasize subtle tints that would be lost in the sun. Soft light also tends to favor animals' fur and birds' feathers. In each country, the quality of light is different and the opportunities are endless. I showed you some images that I took in the Middle East under hard light. In India, the light is always absolutely gorgeous, and this is a soft light on a foggy day in India. So what makes a light source hard or soft? Well, large light sources produce soft light, while smaller light sources create those harsh shadows. Have you ever held a flashlight underneath your face to make scary faces? The creepiness comes from the light and dark areas with no transition between them. This is a small light source. Small lights produce hard shadows because the light cannot be seen behind the subject. Large light source, the light wraps around the subject, creating a small shadows. But distance also play a role. Close light sources are softer, while distant light sources create that harsher transition between light and dark. Now we'll talk about something different. We'll talk about the direction of light. For example, let's say that you are in a completely dark room and you switch on a light. Where that light is in relation to your subject plays a dramatic role on the image you are about to take. Sometimes you can move that light source, and other times you have to move the subject to change the position of the light. So the first one we'll talk about is front light. For colorful subjects, the next best thing to soft light is low front light created by positioning the sun at your back and facing your subject. Since most of the shadows will fall behind your subject, the scene becomes evenly illuminated by the sun and color contrast predominate. It can also bring out the details like here in the sunflowers. But use this method selectively because front line can look flat and uninteresting. It's not dramatic. When the sun is high, middle of the day, or where there is no color in the subject. Front light is really your simplest choice to photograph, especially for landscape, urban, and simple portrait photography. So side light doesn't have to be at a 90-degree angle. It's really an angle from 45 to 90 degrees. So for example, when the sun is coming from your left or right, it's great for bringing out the texture of subjects like shown in this photograph. Since side light strikes one side of your subject while leaving the opposite side in shadow, it automatically creates contrast. In opposition to front light, it creates shadows and depths. The closer the sun is to the horizon, the more dramatic the effects of side lighting will be, as pictured in this image. Side light also helps subjects lacking color be more interesting. It is also a good choice for black and white photography. It creates a sense of three-dimension and it is more dramatic. I really like the dramatic effect it brings because it helps me produce better storytelling portraits and landscape. So a wonderful side light source is to use window light. It's best if the window is oriented south or southwest exposure with the sun low in the sky. So the soft and flattering window light is also wonderful for what we call Rembrandt lighting. I can talk more about Rembrandt lighting during our Zoom Q&A on Saturday morning. It is also a good choice for food photography. It brings out the colors and texture. If you find your shadows are too dark, simply add a reflector to fill light on the other side of your subject and facing the window. Another type of side light is door or awning light. This is one of my favorite when I'm doing travel or street photography. It's extremely useful, like in this picture, in the middle of the day when the sun is high. The light can bounce off the walls and floor, creating an amazing light on your subjects. Backlight. Backlight is the trickiest, but also a favorite of many photographers. And as the name suggests, the light source is behind the subject. One of the easiest ways to use backlight is to create silhouettes. With a strong backlight, this is easy. Simply place your subject between yourself and the light, then expose for the background. If the light behind your subject is strong and there is no other light on it, you will end up with a black silhouette. One of your main concerns when photographing a silhouette is overlap. You want to make sure that your subject does not overlap with anything that might detract from its shape. Backlight also allows to create various moods depending on atmospheric conditions and choice of exposure and framing. Shooting this type of light presents its own set of challenges, and each lens and camera will react differently. In the images here, Dylan Golby used backlight to play with atmospheric conditions like smoke, clouds, or dust. These things become illuminated when they are backlit and start to glow as shown in his pictures here. He uses it to create a lot of mood in his images. Top light can create a very dramatic scene. A harsh beam of light coming from directly above your subject can make for an air of mystery or darkness that a more flattering light will not. You can find this light when the sun is directly above. Think about someone walking in alleyways with a slash of sun coming on it, or when only ceiling lights are present, like on this photograph here, black and white. It can be very useful when aiming to create a deeper, darker mood. Bottom light can also create a very dramatic or soft scenes depending on the light source. Here the photographer has opted for a soft light and mood with the glow of a candle. Photography is drawing with light, and Dappled Light adds one more layer to this concept by using light that is filtered and cast an interesting shadow on the subject. It can be man-made, like on the left-hand side, or it can be a natural filter from a tree on the right-hand side. You can make dappled light by using a strainer, for example. Our next subject, controlling light. So here I will talk about reflectors and fill-in flash. Natural light that is reflected off surfaces can change an entire photograph. It can be reflected off walls, the ground, or any other surface like a reflector. This reflected light creates a soft glow. A photography light reflector bounces existing light and redirects it back onto the subject. Reflectors are excellent tools for adding fill light. They can also create catch lights in portraits, prevent a silhouette, or enhance a product photo. Smaller reflectors create hard light. This means more noticeable shadows. Larger types of reflectors are more common because of the soft light they create. There are different types of reflectors. The color of the reflector affects the light that bounces back. A solid white reflector will produce a very soft light. A reflector with a silver side will reflect more light back than the white. This creates a harsher but more powerful light. A gold reflector is like the silver reflector, only it will give the subject a warm glow. The black side of a reflector will block light. This can help you create your own shade and emphasize shadows. A semi-transparent white is not a reflector, it is a diffuser. Place this between the light and the subject to soften the light. So how do you use diffusers and reflectors to manipulate the light to fall on a particular area of interest on your subject? Well, with the angle and intensity of light in mind, you need to find the best angle for reflecting that light. Small changes to the position of the reflector can make big changes in where the light falls. As you adjust the reflector, watch how the light changes. There is no secret, but practice with a reflector. And you can place your reflector either directly across from the light source. This will reflect the most light, or at an angle to the light source, but be careful not to move too far to the side of the light source or there is no light to reflect, or parallel to the ground. When taking a portrait, place a reflector on the ground or have the subject hold the reflector on his or her lap. This will fill in under eye shadows. This position is not as dramatic as holding the reflector right across from the light source, but it can lead to a more flattering portrait by brightening up the eyes. When you use a diffuser, you need to place it between the light and the subject to soften the light, not reflect it. And remember, the closer the light is, the softer it is. Here, my food setup is really close to the window, and I've placed a diffuser on the window. You need to find a position that's not so close that the reflector or the diffuser is in the picture, but that's not so far that the light reflected doesn't cover enough of your subject. Using field flash. Well, first, this section is not about learning how to use your flash, but how to use the flash in a well-lit situation to remove shadows. The flash can very quickly be overpowering and cast too much light on your subject, doing more than removing shadows and adding soft light, which is the case here in the image on the left. The flash is too powerful and is washing out her skin tone. This is why you need to understand the flash exposure compensation to reduce the power of your flash and be able to obtain a more balanced image like on the left-hand side. So the flash exposure compensation enables you to modify the amount of power from your flash by up to 3 stops in 1/3 stop increments. Please refer to your camera manual to know how to set flash exposure compensation in your camera. So for example, on this image, our exposure compensation is set at -1/1/3. It means that we have decreased the power of our flash. And also do not forget to add a diffuser on your flash to change its light from hard light to soft light. Let's move on to our exercise section. The first exercise is to help you understand the quality of light. So I want you to take a variety of images that illustrate different types of light. I want you to shoot a front light, side light, backlight image of the same subject, like flowers, for example. And then I want you to shoot that subject under a hard light that will create dark shadows, and under a soft light, for example, on an overcast day, which will give you a diffused light. If you do not want to photograph flowers, for example, you can pick your favorite relative or friend and position him in front of a window. And while moving your subject, you can practice front light, side light, and backlight. And then you'll examine the images to get a deeper understanding of how light direction is going to affect your portrait. Then you can take your friend outside and work with a reflector. This second exercise is about making your own reflector and diffuser and setting up your own object photography studio. So this is just a fun optional exercise where you can create diffusers from parchment paper or sheer lining, like here on the window. You can create reflectors from cardboard and aluminum paper. And then you can create black or white reflectors out of foam board. So you can use the image on the right-hand side to inspire you and create object photography. The last exercise will help you understand the color, temperature, and the white balance in your camera. So for this exercise, I want you to choose one outdoor natural light setup and one indoor artificial light setup. And I want you to photograph each setup using each white balance setting available in your camera. So for example, here on the right-hand side, my outside setup is buildings, and they are taken with different white balance: tungsten, fluorescent, daylight, cloudy, shade, and auto white balance. And you can see the difference of tone in this and warmth in these images. In the example below, it's a portrait taken inside with artificial light. And again, you will change your white balance to all the settings available in your camera. Then you compare your images and see what you notice depending on your combination of light source and white balance. How does your image look? Is it warmer, colder? Is it more on the blue side, on the orange side? So that's all for today. Don't forget to follow us at Levy Park Houston and at HCP Online. You can also follow me at Ann Wang. And if you take any images as part of this workshop, tag them at hashtag Levy Park and at hashtag HCP Online to share them with us. Please join me Saturday morning for a live Q&A on Zoom. We can also review some of your images. The information is on the Houston Center for Photography under Education Levy Park Workshops. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope to see you Saturday. Goodbye.